Well, I managed to reach the office of the president, and I looked in at the window, and I saw he was very busy with the typewriter, and so I knocked at the window, and I said, I'm awfully sorry to call in this unconventional way, but the floors below are really all in flames, and he was awfully nice about it, you know. He said, though I quite understand, and under the circumstances, please don't think that I'm angry, and he said, pray take a seat. So I sat down, and then he said, well, now, as a fireman, what do you suggest that I should do? So there were a lot of flames and things coming up through the floor, you know, and so I said, well, I think really the best thing to do is to escape. He said, you know, I'm inclined to agree with you. And he said, we must save the typewriter. So I said, well, I can quite easily do that with the ladder arrangement that I've got outside, if you can only think of a way of saving yourself. He was a very resourceful sort of man, you know, and he said, well, I could wrap myself up in the samples of the motor car tires that I've got in the office and jump out of the window. And so I said, well, I think that'd be an excellent plan, and he did. But it was awfully tragic, you know. He bounced for over a fortnight, and in the long run they had to shoot him to stop him from starving. But I took the typewriter with me, and of course I say there were very few rungs in the ladder, and I reached the ground rather more speedily than I'd anticipated. And she was awfully nasty about it, you know, and took up a very nasty attitude, but there it was. But some fires, of course, are very enjoyable. I never forget an awfully nice fire, very happy little blaze we had at a brewery. But we lost the salvage corps for over 3 days. It was extraordinary. But the first fire I ever fought was the fire at the petroleum station, and I, of course, was frightfully keen to show everybody how keen I was, you know, and I was rushing about with the hose, and in my haste I fastened it onto one of the petrol pumps instead of the hydrant, because it encouraged the flames so awfully. But really, in all my long experience of firefighting, I find now that it's the heat that causes the trouble in a fire. If you can only get rid of that, you do help things so tremendously. And so I invented a little appliance of my own that's attached to the helmet. It's a little fan that's worked with a cord on the right-hand side of the helmet, but really in a big blaze it's no use at all, because it catches a light, you see, and then it doesn't work. And I mentioned it to one of the fire assessors. He wasn't really very interested, but I know all the big assessors, of course. They're mostly away at present, but I've known them. And I was talking to one of them the other day, and he said, well, now, you know, there is a new phase in insurance policies, really, that they're insuring against accident, fire, and flood. And, of course, although it's rather difficult to make a flood, they're very much afraid of the activity of flood bugs, you know. And they caught the ringleader of a very large gang in the basement of a warehouse in the north of England. They caught him red-handed with a cup of water in his hand. He'd been down there a month, and they say if he'd been there 6 weeks, he'd have had the whole place underwater. It only shows you how insidious these things are, doesn't it? Well, I really must slip away now, because I had an urgent letter from a friend of mine. He said he was very worried because somebody was proceeding against him in bankruptcy, and he said, would I be good enough to look in on my way back home and just look in at his warehouse and see if I could advise him in any way. So I told him not to worry, because after all, you can be sure of shell.